He looked at her worn-out sneakers, then at his Patek Philippe watch, and sneered, "You were a fun distraction, Fiona, but let's be real. Some people are born to fly, and others are just dead weight." Caleb Hayes thought he was cutting loose a poor, waitress girlfriend to secure a merger with a billion-dollar tech giant. He thought he had buried her past, her heart, and her future. But he made one fatal miscalculation. He didn't check who her family was. He didn't know that the nobody he abandoned was the sole heiress to the Harrington empire. And when her grandfather returns from the shadows, he isn't just coming for a reunion. He's coming for blood. The rain in Boston didn't wash things clean. It just made the grit on the sidewalk slicker. Fiona Bennett stood outside the glass doors of Hayes & Co., shivering in a coat that had seen 3 too many winters. She clutched a brown envelope against her chest, the paper damp and crinkling under her grip. Inside was a sonogram, a grainy, black and white promise of a future she hadn't planned but already loved. She wasn't here to beg. She was here to tell him. Through the glass, she saw him. Caleb Hayes. He was standing in the lobby, laughing with a group of men in suits that cost more than her annual rent. He looked different than the man who used to eat take-out noodles with her on her second-hand sofa. His jaw was sharper, his posture rigid with new money arrogance. He checked his reflection in the glass, adjusted his silk tie, and then his eyes landed on her. The smile vanished. It was replaced by a look of sheer annoyance, like he'd spotted a stain on his cuff. He said something to the men, patted one on the shoulder, and walked out. He didn't invite her in. He stepped out into the rain, not even opening his umbrella, guiding her forcefully away from the entrance toward the alley where the valet parking was. "What are you doing here, Fiona?" His voice was low, a hiss of steam escaping a valve. "I told you I have the board meeting of the century today. The merger with Vane Dynamics is happening in an hour." "I needed to talk to you, Caleb. It's important," Fiona said, her voice trembling, not from the cold, but from the fear of his reaction. Caleb ran a hand through his perfectly gelled hair. "Look, if this is about the rent, I sent you a check. It's generous. It's a severance package, essentially." "Severance?" Fiona stepped back, the word hitting her like a slap. "We were together for 2 years, Caleb. I'm not an employee you can just fire." "Relationships are transactions, Fiona. Value for value." He looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on her scuffed boots. "I'm scaling up. You? You're stationary. I need a partner who brings capital, connections, or status to the table. Jessica Vane brings all 3. Fiona felt the blood drain from her face. "Jessica? You're seeing her?" "I'm marrying her," Caleb corrected, checking his watch again. "The engagement is part of the merger deal. It's business, Fiona. Don't look so naive. This is how the real world works. You wouldn't understand. You've never been part of it." "I have something to tell you," she whispered, holding out the damp envelope. I'm pregnant." Caleb froze. For a second, just a split second, she saw a flicker of panic in his eyes. He snatched the envelope, ripped it open, and stared at the image. Then he laughed, a cold, dry sound. "How convenient," he sneered. "Right when I strike gold, you suddenly have an anchor to weigh me down. How do I even know it's mine?" "How dare you?" Fiona gasped, tears finally spilling over. Caleb crumpled the sonogram, her baby's first picture, into a tight ball and tossed it into a nearby puddle. "Get rid of it. I'm not sinking my career for a mistake. If you contact me again, if you try to drag my name through the mud with this sob story, I will bury you in legal fees until you're homeless. Do you understand? You are a nobody, Fiona. You have zero power. Walk away." A sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, revealing Jessica Vane, blonde, immaculate, and looking bored. "Caleb, darling, we're going to be late. Daddy is waiting." Caleb's face instantly transformed into a mask of adoration. "Coming, love." He turned back to Fiona one last time, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You were a fun distraction. But let's be real. Some people are born to fly, and others are just dead weight. Goodbye, Fiona." He got into the car. The door slammed shut with a heavy, expensive thud. As the Mercedes peeled away, splashing dirty water onto Fiona's jeans, she stood alone in the alley. She looked down at the puddle. The crumpled ball of paper was slowly soaking through, dissolving. She knelt in the grime, picked it up, and tried to smooth it out. The image was ruined, but the reality wasn't. She touched her stomach. "He's wrong," she whispered to the empty alley. "We aren't dead weight." But as she walked to the subway, counting the $12 left in her bank account, she realized that in Caleb's world, she might as well be dead. He had the money, the lawyers, and the Vane family behind him. She was just a 22-year-old waitress with no parents, no degree, and a broken heart. She thought she had hit rock bottom. She didn't know that 3,000 miles away, in a high-security estate in the Swiss Alps, a phone was ringing. A call that would eventually change the axis of her entire world. 5 years later, the aroma of burnt coffee and antiseptic filled the air. Fiona adjusted the strap of her bag, wincing as it dug into her shoulder. She had just finished a 10-hour shift as a paralegal at a mid-tier law firm in Queens, a job she had fought tooth and nail to get while taking night classes. She wasn't Fiona Bennett anymore. She went by Fiona Miller now, a small change, but necessary. She didn't want Caleb, or anyone associated with him, to find her. Not that he was looking. Caleb Hayes was everywhere. His face was plastered on billboards in Times Square. Hayes Vane Tech had revolutionized AI logistics. He was the man of the year in Time magazine. He was worth billions. He had the perfect life, the perfect wife, and the perfect reputation. Fiona walked into her small one-bedroom apartment. It was cramped, but it was warm. "Mommy." A 4-year-old boy with messy brown hair and piercing blue eyes launched himself at her legs. Leo. He was the spitting image of Caleb, but with a kindness in his eyes that his father never possessed. "Hey, superhero," Fiona groaned playfully, lifting him up. "Did you eat your dinner?" "Mrs. Higgins made mac and cheese," Leo cheered. Mrs. Higgins was the elderly neighbor who watched Leo for a fraction of what a daycare would cost. Fiona sat Leo down and turned on the small TV in the corner to distract him while she sorted through the mail. Bill, final notice. Bill. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Even with the paralegal job, the rent in New York was suffocating. Leo needed dental work, and the car she used to get to night school had broken down last week. She was drowning, slowly and quietly. On the TV, a news anchor's voice cut through her thoughts. And in a shocking turn of events, industrial titan Jason Harrington has been discharged from the Zurich Medical Center. Rumors are swirling that the ghost of Wall Street is returning to America after a 20-year exile. Fiona glanced up. The screen showed grainy footage of an old man in a wheelchair being loaded into a private jet. He looked frail, his face hidden behind sunglasses and a scarf, but there was something terrifying about the way his security detail moved, like a military unit protecting a nuclear warhead. Harrington, the founder of Harrington Global Shipping, has no known heirs following the tragic death of his daughter, Evelyn, 25 years ago. His empire, estimated at $50 billion, remains without a successor. Fiona froze. The envelope in her hand dropped to the floor. Evelyn. She ran to her small bedroom, pulled a shoebox from under the bed, and rummaged through old Polaroids. Her mother. Her mother who had died of an overdose when Fiona was 6, leaving her to the foster system. Her mother, who was always paranoid, always looking over her shoulder. Fiona found the old, tattered birth certificate her mother had kept hidden inside a Bible. Mother, Evelyn Rose Bennett. Father, unknown. But there was a photo. A faded photo of her mother as a teenager, standing on a yacht, smiling next to a stern-looking man with silver hair. On the back, in fading ink, was written, Dad and Me, Lake Como, 1998. Fiona looked at the TV, then at the photo. The man on the yacht was younger, stronger, but the jawline was undeniable. It was Jason Harrington. No, Fiona whispered. It's not possible. Her mother had told her they were alone in the world. She said her family was bad people. She said they had to hide. Fiona had always assumed her mother meant she had run away from an abusive home or a debt collector. She never imagined her mother had run away from $50 billion. A knock on the door made her jump. It wasn't the polite knock of Mrs. Higgins. It was 3 sharp, authoritative raps. Fiona's heart hammered against her ribs. She walked to the peephole. 2 men in black suits stood in the hallway. They didn't look like police. They looked like the Secret Service. Fiona Miller. A deep voice came through the door. Or should I say, Fiona Bennett. Panic seized her. She grabbed Leo, rushing him into the bedroom. Stay here, baby, don't come out. Mommy? Hush, Leo, play with your blocks. She closed the bedroom door and returned to the main entrance. She didn't open it. Who are you? I'm calling the police. There is no need for that, Miss Bennett, the voice said calmly. We work for Mr. Jason Harrington. He would like to meet his granddaughter. The lock clicked. Fiona hadn't unlocked it. The door swung open. The 2 men stepped aside, creating a corridor. Behind them, in the dingy hallway of her Queen's apartment complex, sat an elderly man in a sleek, motorized wheelchair. He wore a charcoal suit that looked like armor. His face was lined with maps of hard years, but his eyes, steel gray and sharp as razors, scanned the peeling wallpaper, the stained carpet, and finally landed on Fiona. He didn't smile. He looked furious. So, Jason Harrington rumbled, his voice sounding like grinding stones. This is how my blood has been living. Fiona backed up against the kitchen counter, grabbing a steak knife from the drying rack. Stay back. I don't know who you are, but you can't just barge in here. Jason looked at the knife, then up at her eyes. A flicker of amusement crossed his face. She has the fire, at least. Evelyn had fire, but she used it to burn herself down. You look like you're using it to survive. I said, get out! Fiona yelled. The bedroom door creaked open. Leo stood there, holding a toy truck. Mummy? Who is the old man? Jason Harrington's head snapped toward the boy. The air in the room seemed to vanish. The old man stared at Leo, at the blue eyes, the messy hair, the chin. Jason's hand trembled as he lifted it, pointing a bony finger at the boy. And who? Is that? That's my son, Fiona said fiercely, stepping between the billionaire and her child. And you're not touching him. Jason slowly lowered his hand. He looked around the cramped apartment again. The poverty, the struggle, the sheer desperation of her existence. His expression hardened into something terrifying. It wasn't anger at her anymore. It was the wrath of a king who realized his castle had been left unguarded. My private investigators told me you had a child, Jason said quietly. They also told me about the father, Caleb Hayes, the man who is currently merging with the Vane family to monopolize the Atlantic trade routes. My trade routes. Fiona lowered the knife slightly. What do you want? I'm dying, Fiona. Jason said bluntly. I have 6 months, maybe a year. I spent 20 years angry at my daughter for running away with a musician I hated. I let my pride keep me from finding her. By the time I tried, she was gone, and you were lost in the system. He rolled his wheelchair forward, ignoring the knife. I have built an empire that controls the flow of goods for half the planet. And I have no one to leave it to. Vultures like Caleb Hayes are circling, waiting for me to die so they can pick the carcass clean. He stopped inches from her. I don't want a hug, granddaughter. I don't want forgiveness. I want an heir. I want to teach you how to crush the people who put you in this. He gestured around the room with disgust. This box. Fiona looked at Leo, then at the bill pile on the counter, and finally at the old man who offered a lifeline wrapped in barbed wire. Caleb thinks he's untouchable, Fiona said, her voice hardening. He destroyed me. He treated me like trash. Then stop being trash, Jason snapped. Be the incinerator. He extended a hand. It was frail, but the ring on his finger bore a crest that carried more weight than most countries. Pack your bags, Fiona. We're leaving. And tell the boy to bring his truck. We're going to buy the factory that made it. Fiona looked at the knife in her hand, then dropped it into the sink. The clatter rang out like a bell, signaling the end of a round. She picked up Leo, looked the billionaire in the eye, and nodded. One condition, she said. Name it. Caleb Hayes doesn't just lose his money. I want him to lose his name. I want him to feel what I felt in that alleyway. Jason Harrington smiled, and it was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. My dear, he said, by the time we are done with Mr. Hayes, he will wish he had stayed in that alley with you. The transition from a Queen's walk-up to the Harrington estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was not a dream. It was a cold plunge. Fiona expected luxury. She expected soft beds and warm food. What she got was a boot camp disguised as a mansion. The estate, known as Ironwood, was a sprawling Gothic structure of grey stone and creeping ivy, sitting on 200 acres of manicured silence. It felt less like a home and more like a fortress designed to keep the world out, and secrets in. For the first month, Fiona barely saw the sun. Posture, Jason barked, tapping his cane against the polished mahogany floor of the library. You are slouching. You walk like a woman apologizing for her existence. A Harrington never apologizes for taking up space. Fiona straightened her spine until it ached. She was wearing heels that cost more than her old car, walking back and forth across the library while balancing a leather-bound ledger on her head. I'm tired, grandfather, she murmured. It was 11 p.m. She had been up since 5, studying corporate law, market trends, and French. Tired? Jason scoffed. He sat in his leather wingback chair, sipping brandy that looked like liquid fire. Caleb Hayes isn't tired. He's currently closing a deal in Tokyo while you complain about your feet. Do you think the Vanes became royalty by sleeping in? They eat weakness, Fiona. If you walk into that boardroom looking like a victim, they will tear you apart before you even open your mouth. Fiona let out a frustrated breath, the ledger sliding off her head and hitting the floor with a heavy thud. I'm not a CEO, Jason. I'm a paralegal who was wiping tables 5 years ago. Maybe this is a mistake. Maybe I can't be what you want. Jason stared at her. The silence in the room was heavy, smelling of old paper and wood smoke. He motioned for her to come closer. When she stood before him, he reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a tablet. He tapped the screen and handed it to her. Look. It was a live stock ticker for Hayes Vane Tech. The numbers were green, climbing vertically. But beneath it was a news article from a gossip column. Caleb Hayes and Jessica Vane announced date for Wedding of the Century at the Pierre Hotel. Insiders say the merger is the true marriage. Love is just the PR. There was a photo of them. Caleb looked regal, his hand possessively on Jessica's waist. Jessica looked triumphant. "He erased you," Jason said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. "He didn't just leave you, Fiona. He pretended you never happened. He threw away your child's picture like it was a candy wrapper. Do you want to go back to Queens and wait for the eviction notice? Or do you want to be the one holding the pen when his life is signed away?" Fiona looked at the photo. She looked at Caleb's smug smile, the same smile he gave her before he got into that car 5 years ago. The exhaustion in her legs vanished, replaced by a cold, hard knot in her chest. She bent down, picked up the heavy ledger, and placed it back on her head. "Again," she said. While Fiona was being forged into a weapon, Leo was the only one bringing light into the gloomy halls of Ironwood. The staff, Arthur the butler, the maids, the groundskeepers, were terrified of Jason. They moved like ghosts, afraid to make a sound. But Leo didn't know he was supposed to be afraid. One rainy Tuesday, Jason was working in his study, the door firmly shut. He was reviewing the acquisition files for a shipping lane in the Pacific, a headache thumping behind his eyes. The door creaked open. Jason looked up, ready to fire whoever dared disturb him. Leo stood there, holding a red plastic truck and a half-eaten cookie. "Mr. Grumpy?" Jason blinked. "Excuse me? Mummy says you're busy being the king, but my truck broke." Leo walked right up to the massive oak desk, ignoring the glare that had made grown men weep. He placed the toy on the desk, right on top of a multi-million-dollar contract. "Can you fix it?" Jason stared at the cheap plastic toy. One of the wheels had popped off. He looked at the boy. Leo had Evelyn's eyes. It was like looking at a ghost of his daughter, but without the sadness. "I am not a mechanic, Leonard," Jason grumbled. "You have a big house. You must have glue," Leo stated, with the undeniable logic of a 4-year-old. Jason hesitated. Then, with a heavy sigh, he opened his top drawer and pulled out a tube of industrial adhesive he used for model ships, his only hobby. "Bring it here," Jason commanded. For the next 20 minutes, the shipping empire of the Western Hemisphere paused. Jason Harrington, the ghost of Wall Street, sat hunched over a $5 toy, carefully reattaching a wheel while a 4-year-old ate a cookie on his knee. When Fiona walked past the open door an hour later, she stopped dead in her tracks. Jason was showing Leo how to spin a globe of the world. "And here," Jason was saying, his voice uncharacteristically soft, "is where we have ships, and here is where the bad men live. We don't let the bad men take our boats, do we, Leo?" "No!" Leo shouted. "We sink 'em." Jason chuckled, a rusty, unused sound. "Precisely." Fiona leaned against the doorframe, tears pricking her eyes. She realized then that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming a family that had been broken for decades. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. Fiona stood in front of the floor-to-length mirror in the master suite. The woman staring back was a stranger. Her hair, once frizzy and tied back in messy buns, was now a sleek, cascading waterfall of dark silk cut to frame her cheekbones. Her skin glowed from months of expensive dermatological treatments and proper nutrition. But the biggest change was the eyes. The fear was gone. In its place was a stillness, a dangerous calm. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged her curves and pooled at her feet. It was modest yet striking, designed to draw the eye and hold it. Around her neck hung the Harrington star, a sapphire necklace that hadn't been seen in public since her grandmother died in the 80s. "You look like her," a voice said. Fiona turned. Jason sat in his wheelchair at the door. He was wearing a tuxedo, his white hair slicked back. He looked frail, but his eyes were sharp. "My mother?" Fiona asked. "No," Jason said. "My wife. You have her steel. Evelyn had her heart, but you have your grandmother's spine." He wheeled himself forward and handed her a small earpiece. "Tonight is the Red Cross Gala at the Met," Jason said. "Caleb will be there. The Vanes will be there. The entire city will be there to fawn over them." "I'm ready," Fiona said, putting the earpiece in. It vanished under her hair. "Remember," Jason instructed, "tonight isn't about destroying him. Not yet. Tonight is about the hook. You are the bait. You need to make him want you, wonder about you, and fear you, all without him realizing who you are. He hasn't seen you in 5 years. You were a waitress in a hoodie to him. Tonight, you are Fiona Harrington." "Does he know the name Harrington has an heir?" "No," Jason smiled thinly. "The world thinks I'm a dying old man with no legacy. We haven't released the press statement about your adoption of the name. Tonight is the debut." Fiona took a deep breath. She touched the sapphire at her throat. "Let's go hunting, grandfather." The Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed into a playground for the 1%. The Temple of Denda was bathed in soft golden light. Waiters moved like synchronized swimmers, carrying trays of champagne through a sea of black ties and designer gowns. The air buzzed with the low hum of gossip. The main topic, as expected, was the merger. Hayes Vane. It was being hailed as the union of the decade. At the center of the room, holding court, was Caleb Hayes. He looked older, harder. The years of ruthless climbing had given him a permanent etched frown, even when he smiled. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. Beside him, Jessica Vane shimmered in silver, looking beautiful but brittle, her eyes darting around the room to see who was watching her. "Congratulations on the Tokyo deal, Caleb," a banker said, shaking his hand. "Thank you, Tom," Caleb replied, his voice smooth, practiced. "It's just the beginning. Once the logistics AI is fully integrated, we'll control 40% of the market." "The Harringtons won't like that," the banker joked nervously. Caleb laughed, a dismissive sound. "Jason Harrington is a dinosaur. He's rotting away in some Swiss clinic. The Empire is a ghost ship. By the time he kicks the bucket, we'll have bought his roots for pennies on the dollar." Jessica sipped her champagne. "Can we stop talking about business, darling? It's a party." "Business is the party, Jess," Caleb muttered, his eyes scanning the room over her shoulder, always looking for the next opportunity, the next connection. Then the room went quiet. It wasn't a sudden silence, but a ripple that started at the grand entrance and spread inward. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Caleb frowned, annoyed that the attention had shifted away from him. "What is going on?" He turned to look at the top of the stairs. A woman was descending. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, like water flowing downhill. The midnight blue velvet of her dress absorbed the light, making her skin look like alabaster. She was alone, which in this society was a statement of supreme confidence. She didn't look at the floor. She looked straight ahead, her gaze sweeping over the crowd with an air of boredom. Caleb felt a jolt in his chest. A primal recognition fired in the back of his brain, but he squashed it immediately. No, it couldn't be. The woman looked expensive. She carried herself with the kind of aristocratic indifference that couldn't be taught. It was bred. "Who is that?" Jessica asked, her voice tight with jealousy. "I don't know," Caleb whispered, unable to look away. The woman reached the bottom of the stairs. A space cleared around her naturally. She took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter without even looking at him. A subtle gesture of total dominance. "Go to her," Jason's voice crackled in Fiona's ear. He was watching via the security feeds from the estate, orchestrating the night like a general. "Do not engage first. Let him come to you. Stand by the Egyptian sculpture. The lighting is better." Fiona walked through the crowd. She could feel the eyes on her. Men looked with desire. Women looked with calculation. She stopped by the ancient sandstone statue, turning slightly so her profile was visible to Caleb. She felt his approach before she saw him. The scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and money drifted to her. It used to make her heart race with love. Now it made her stomach turn with bile. She forced her face into a mask of cool detachment. "I don't believe we've met," Caleb's voice came from behind her. Fiona turned slowly. She looked him in the eye. Up close, the resemblance to the girl he had dumped in the rain was there. The shape of the eyes, the curve of the lip. But the context was so wrong, so impossible, that Caleb's brain refused to accept it. He saw a billionaire heiress. He didn't see the waitress who counted coupons. "I don't believe we have," Fiona said. Her voice was lower, trained by vocal coaches to lose the Queen's inflection. It was smooth, rich, and cold. Caleb blinked. He was clearly unsettled. "I'm Caleb. Caleb Hayes." He extended his hand. He expected her to recognize the name. He expected her to gush. Fiona looked at his hand, then back at his face. She didn't take it. "I know who you are, Mr. Hayes," she said softly. "The man who thinks the Harrington Empire is a ghost ship." Caleb's smile froze. I beg your pardon? That was a private conversation. In a room full of sharks, Mr. Hayes, nothing is private. Blood travels in the water." She took a sip of her drink, holding his gaze. "You should be careful. Dinosaurs have big teeth." Caleb took a step closer, his curiosity warring with his confusion. "You look incredibly familiar." Have we what?" Fiona arched a brow. "Met in a boardroom? I doubt it. You seem to prefer the sound of your own voice too much to notice who else is at the table." It was an insult, but delivered with such elegance that Caleb was intrigued rather than offended. He loved a challenge. "You have me at a disadvantage," Caleb said, lowering his voice to a seductive purr, the same tone he used to use on her when he wanted something. "You know my name, and my business strategy. But I don't know yours." Jessica appeared at Caleb's elbow, looping her arm aggressively through his. She glared at Fiona. "Caleb, the auction is starting. Daddy wants us at the table." She looked Fiona up and down, sneering. "Nice dress. Rental?" Fiona laughed. It was a dark, genuine laugh. "Oh, Jessica, you always did have a keen eye for price tags, but no eye for value." Jessica's jaw dropped. "Do I know you?" The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone on the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The auction is about to begin. Our first item tonight is a prime parcel of commercial waterfront property in the Boston Harbor, generously donated by the estate of the late Arthur Vane." "That's my father's land," Jessica hissed to Caleb. "We're buying it back to keep it in the family trust. Come on." Caleb started to turn away, but he looked back at Fiona. "Will you be bidding?" "I'm just here to watch the show," Fiona said enigmatically. They moved to the front row. Fiona moved to a table on the far right, where a single seat was reserved. The bidding for the Boston Harbor land started at $5 million. "$5 million!" Caleb called out, raising his paddle. He looked bored. This was a formality. $6 million, a voice called from the back. $7, Caleb counted immediately. $8 million. Caleb, annoyed, turned to see who was bidding. It was a competitor. 10 million, Caleb said firmly. Let's end this. The room murmured. 10 million was well above market value. The competitor lowered his paddle. Going once, the auctioneer shouted. Going twice. Fiona raised her paddle. Number 001. 15 million, she said. Her voice was clear, cutting through the room like a bell. Caleb spun around in his chair. Jessica gasped. 15 million? The auctioneer stammered. I have 15 million from bidder 001. Do I hear 16? Caleb's face flushed red. He hated losing. He especially hated losing to a stranger who had insulted him. 16 million, Caleb snarled. 20 million, Fiona said instantly, not even looking up from her program. The crowd went wild. Murmurs erupted everywhere. Who is she? Is she crazy? Caleb, stop, Jessica whispered. It's not worth that much. It's just a warehouse district. It's about dominance, Jess, Caleb hissed. He stood up and looked directly at Fiona. 22 million. Fiona slowly lowered her program. She looked across the room, locking eyes with Caleb. She smiled, a small, pitying smile. 30 million, she said. The room gasped. Silence fell. 30 million was absurd. It was a slaughter. Caleb stood frozen. He couldn't go to 30. The board would crucify him. He had to fold. He, Caleb Hayes, had to fold in front of all of New York. Going once, going twice. Sold to the lady in blue for $30 million. The gavel banged. Caleb stormed over to her table, Jessica trailing behind him. He slammed his hands on the table, leaning in close. Who do you think you are? He demanded, his voice shaking with rage. You just overpaid by $20 million. Do you think this is a game? Fiona stood up. She was wearing heels, making her almost eye level with him. It is a game, Caleb. You just don't know the rules. Who sent you? Caleb demanded. Who are you? Fiona leaned in close to his ear, close enough that her breath brushed his neck. You told me once that some people are born to fly, and others are dead weight, she whispered. Caleb went rigid. His skin turned the color of ash. He pulled back as if burned, staring at her with wide, terrified eyes. The memory of the rainy alleyway crashed into him. Fiona, he breathed. No, it's impossible. You're a waitress. Fiona stepped back, smoothing her dress. She turned to the crowd where the press was gathering, cameras flashing. My name, she said, loud enough for the reporters to hear, is Fiona Harrington, granddaughter of Jason Harrington, and the new CEO of Harrington Global. She looked at Caleb, who looked like he was about to vomit. And I suggest you enjoy the party, Caleb, because tomorrow I'm buying your debt. She turned and walked away, the flashbulbs exploding around her like lightning, leaving Caleb Hayes standing in the ruins of his perfect night. The silence in the limousine on the way back from the gala was louder than a scream. Caleb Hayes stared out the tinted window as the lights of Manhattan blurred into streaks of neon violence. His hand, resting on the leather seat, was trembling. He clenched it into a fist to stop the motion, but the tremor was internal, a structural failure deep within his nervous system. Fiona Harrington. The name bounced around his skull like a ricochet. It didn't make sense. Fiona was the girl who clipped coupons for pasta sauce. Fiona was the girl who cried because she couldn't afford a new winter coat. She wasn't this. She wasn't a titan who dropped $30 million on a warehouse just to make a point. You're sweating, Jessica's voice cut through the dark. Caleb turned. His fiancée was looking at him with a mixture of suspicion and distaste. She was scrolling through her phone, the screen illuminating her sharp, perfect features. It's hot in here, Caleb lied, loosening his tie. It's 68 degrees, Caleb, Jessica said icily. She turned the phone screen toward him. Twitter is melting down. The return of Harrington is trending #1 worldwide. And do you know what the second trend is? Chas Caleb Hayes owned. Put it away, Jess. Did you know? She demanded, her voice rising. Did you know she was a Harrington when you were sleeping with her? No, of course not, Caleb snapped. She was a nobody. She waited tables at a diner near the campus. She never mentioned money. She never mentioned family. Well, she certainly mentioned you tonight, Jessica sneered. Dead weight. That sounded personal, Caleb. Very personal. My father is asking questions. The board is asking questions. If this merger falls through because you have a vengeful ex-girlfriend with infinite capital, I will leave you so fast your head will spin. Caleb looked at her. In Fiona's eyes, 5 years ago, he had seen adoration. In Jessica's eyes, he saw only calculation. He realized with a sickening jolt that he was exactly where he wanted to be, surrounded by people who viewed relationships as transactions. It won't fall through, Caleb said, trying to summon his usual arrogance. She's just a girl playing dress-up. Jason is the brain and he's dying. I'll handle her. But as the car pulled up to their penthouse, Caleb felt a cold dread in his stomach. He remembered the alley. He remembered the rain. And for the first time in 5 years, he remembered the envelope. The sonogram. He rushed into the penthouse, pouring himself a double scotch with shaking hands. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years, a private investigator named Roach who specialized in dirty laundry. Roach, it's Hayes. Mr. Hayes. Late call, the voice on the other end rasped. I need you to find out everything about Fiona Harrington's life for the last 5 years. Specifically medical records from 5 years ago. Looking for a skeleton in the closet? I'm looking for a child, Caleb whispered. Find out if she had it. Find out where it is. Three days later, the atmosphere in the Harrington Global Headquarters was electric. For 2 decades, the offices had been quiet, dusty, and slow. Now they were a war room. Fiona sat at the head of the massive obsidian conference table. She wore a white power suit that made her look like a pristine blade. Jason sat to her right, wrapped in a blanket, his breathing labored. He was fading, but his mind was still sharp. The audit of Hayes Vane is complete, Fiona said, sliding a folder across the table to the assembled lawyers. Tell me the weak point. It's leverage, Ms. Harrington, the chief financial officer said. Caleb Hayes expanded too fast. He borrowed heavily to acquire the logistics AI tech for the merger. He leveraged his existing assets to secure short-term loans from Zurich Mutual. He's cash poor, Fiona mused. He's rich on paper, but he's drowning in debt until the merger finalizes and he gets the Vane family cash injection. Correct. If the merger stalls, or if the loans are called in early, he's insolvent. Fiona tapped her pen on the table. Who holds the debt? Zurich Mutual, a consortium of Swiss banks. Jason coughed, a wet, rattling sound. He smirked. And who sits on the board of the consortium, Fiona? Fiona smiled. You do, grandfather. Buy it, Jason rasped. Buy the debt. Become his banker. Then squeeze. The meeting was interrupted by the buzzing of Fiona's personal phone. She ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. She frowned and picked it up. It was an unknown number. She answered. This is Fiona Harrington. He looks like me. The voice was Caleb's. It was breathless, triumphant, and terrifying. Fiona's blood ran cold. She stood up, turning her back to the lawyers. Excuse me, she said, walking to the floor-to-ceiling window. What do you want, Caleb? I saw the photos, Caleb said. Roach found them. School records. Leo Bennett. He's 4 turning 5. The timeline matches perfectly. You have no right to say his name, Fiona hissed. I have every right. Caleb laughed, but it sounded manic. He's my son, Fiona. You hid my heir from me. Do you know what the courts will say about that? You committed paternity fraud. You told me to get rid of it, Fiona said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. You threw his picture in a puddle. I was stressed. I was young. Caleb backpedaled smoothly, rewriting history in real time. I didn't mean it. But you stole him. And now I find out he's the heir to the Harrington fortune? Oh, Fiona, you played a good game, but you forgot one thing. Biology beats money. Stay away from him, Caleb. I want to see him, Caleb said. Tomorrow. My office. Or I go to the press. Billionaire heiress steals child from loving father. Imagine the headlines. Imagine what that does to your stock price. Imagine what it does to Leo. The line went dead. Fiona lowered the phone. She looked out at the city skyline. She felt nausea rising in her throat, but then she felt a hand on her arm. Jason had wheeled himself over. He looked at her, his grey eyes burning. He found out? Jason asked. Yes. And he thinks he can use the boy? He's going to blackmail me with custody, Fiona said. He doesn't want Leo. He wants leverage. Jason nodded slowly. He didn't look worried. He looked disappointed in Caleb's lack of imagination. Then we change the battlefield, Jason said. He wants to be a father. Let's give him a paternity test. But let's do it on our terms. Do not be afraid, Fiona. A wolf does not fear the dog. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. at the Hayes Vane headquarters. Fiona chose to go to him. It was a calculated move. She wanted him to feel secure in his own castle before she brought the walls down. She walked into the glass-walled building, alone. No lawyers. No Jason. Just her. The receptionist looked terrified as Fiona walked past the desk. Miss Harrington, Mr. Hayes is in a meeting. You can't... Fiona pushed open the double doors to Caleb's office. Caleb was sitting behind his desk, looking smug. Jessica Vane was sitting on the sofa, flipping through a magazine, looking bored but tense. Fiona, Caleb said, leaning back in his chair. I'm glad you came to your senses. Jessica knows everything, by the way. We're a team. We're ready to welcome little Leo into the family. Jessica didn't look up. If the DNA matches, she muttered. I'm not raising a bastard unless there's a trust fund attached. Fiona stood in the center of the room. She placed her handbag on a chair, but didn't sit. There will be no welcome, Fiona said calmly. Leo is my son. My father is on the birth certificate as unknown. You forfeited your rights in that alleyway. The courts won't see it that way, Caleb smirked. I've already spoken to my lawyers. Joint custody is the standard. And since you work such long hours running your grandfather's dying empire, I'm sure a judge would love to place Leo with a stable 2-parent household. Me and Jessica. He stood up and walked around the desk. But we can avoid all that unpleasantness. I'm a reasonable man. What's the price, Caleb? Fiona asked. Let's skip the loving father act. How much to make you go away? Caleb's eyes gleamed. I don't want your money, Fiona. I want the debt. He picked up a piece of paper from his desk. My sources tell me Harrington Global just purchased the debt packages from Zurich Mutual. You own my loans, Fiona. $200 million worth. I do. Forgive the debt, Caleb said. Wipe it clean, and sign over the shipping rights to the North Atlantic lane. Do that, and I'll sign an NDA. I'll never contact Leo. I'll disappear from his life. Fiona looked at him. She looked at the desperation hiding behind his greed. He was selling his own son for a shipping lane. It was so grotesque it was almost funny. "You really are a monster," she said softly. "I'm a businessman," Caleb shrugged. "It's a win-win. You keep your secret son, I keep my company. Do we have a deal?" Fiona reached into her bag. Caleb thought she was reaching for a pen. Instead, she pulled out a voice recorder. The red light was blinking. Caleb's face went pale. "What is that?" "New York is a one-party consent state, Caleb," Fiona said, her voice dropping to that dangerous low register. "I just recorded you offering to sell your parental rights for $200 million. I'll disappear from his life." Was that the phrase? "You set me up," Caleb snarled. He lunged for the recorder, but Fiona stepped back quickly. "Touch me," Fiona said, "and my security team, which is currently in your lobby, will come up here and break your hands." She pressed the stop button on the recorder and slipped it back into her bag. "Here is what is going to happen," Fiona said. She walked over to his desk and picked up a framed photo of Caleb and Jessica. She looked at it, then dropped it. Glass shattered across the floor. "I am not forgiving your debt, Caleb. In fact, I'm calling it in. You are in violation of the covenant regarding debt-to-equity ratios. I reviewed your books. You cooked them to impress the Vanes." Jessica sat up straight, her eyes wide. "What?" "He lied to you, Jessica," Fiona said, looking at the other woman. "He's not worth billions. He's worth nothing. The company is hollow. And as of this morning, Harrington Global has filed a motion to freeze his assets, pending a forensic audit." "You can't do that!" Caleb screamed, his veins bulging in his neck. "The merger is next week." "The merger is dead," Fiona said coldly, "because once I release this recording, and once the audit goes public, no bank in the world will touch you, and no judge will give a child to a man who tried to sell him." Caleb looked around the room, panic setting in. He looked at Jessica. "Jess, don't listen to her. She's lying. She's jealous." Jessica stood up. She looked at the shattered glass on the floor. She looked at Caleb, sweating and desperate. "Is it true?" Jessica asked quietly. "Are we broke?" "It's a cash flow issue," Caleb yelled. "It's temporary." Jessica picked up her purse. "My father warned me about you. He said you were a climber." She walked to the door. "Jessica, wait," Caleb pleaded. "Don't call me," she said. She looked at Fiona with a newfound respect, or perhaps fear. "He's all yours." The door slammed shut. Caleb stood alone in the silence. His empire was crumbling in real time. He turned to Fiona, his eyes full of hatred. "You think you've won?" he whispered. "You think because you have money now, you're safe? I know where you live. I know where Leo goes to school." It was a threat, a physical threat. Fiona didn't flinch. She took a step closer to him. "You're forgetting who my grandfather is, Caleb. Jason Harrington didn't build his company by being nice. He built it by removing obstacles." She pulled a document from her bag and slammed it onto his desk. "This is a restraining order. It's already signed by a judge. If you come within 500 feet of me or my son, you go to jail. If you mention his name to the press, I release the recording, and you go to jail for extortion. If you try to run, my lawyers will freeze your passport." She leaned in, her face inches from his. "You wanted to be in the big leagues, Caleb? Welcome to the big leagues. Now get out of my building. We're repossessing it on Monday." Fiona turned and walked out. She didn't look back. She felt lighter than she had in 5 years. But as she stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed. It was Arthur, the butler from Ironwood. "Miss Fiona?" Arthur's voice was broken, sobbing. "Arthur, what is it?" "It's Mr. Jason, ma'am. He collapsed. The paramedics are here. You need to come home. Now. The elevator doors closed, trapping Fiona in a box of mirrors, the Victory turning to ash in her mouth. The sirens didn't wail. They hummed, a low, respectful mournfulness, as the private ambulance idled in the driveway of Ironwood. But Fiona knew it was too late for hospitals. Jason had insisted on staying in his library, surrounded by the smell of old paper and the empire he had built. Fiona sat by the leather wingback chair, holding his hand. It felt light, like a dry leaf. "Don't look so grim," Jason whispered, his eyes fluttering open. The steel grey was fading, replaced by a milky haze. "I told you, I was on borrowed time. I just needed to make sure the accounts were balanced." "You can't go yet," Fiona said, her voice cracking. "I still have questions. I still need you." "You don't need me," Jason coughed, a weak smile touching his lips. He looked past her, toward the door where Leo was peeking in, holding his glued-together red truck. "You have the fire, and you have the reason to burn." He gestured for Leo. The boy walked over, unafraid. Jason placed his hand on Leo's small head. "The world is hard, boy," Jason rasped. "But you are a Harrington now. We don't break." Jason looked back at Fiona. "The Vane merger is dead. Caleb is ruined. The debt is yours. The ships are yours. Do not let them rust, Fiona. And forgive your mother for running away." His hand slipped from hers. The chest that had held the breath of a titan fell still. The clock on the mantelpiece continued to tick, marking the first second of Fiona's reign. 2 weeks later, it rained. It was the same kind of freezing, miserable Boston rain that had soaked Fiona 5 years ago in the alleyway. But this time she didn't feel it. She stood under a large black umbrella held by Arthur, watching the casket of Jason Harrington being lowered into the family crypt. As the ceremony ended, Fiona walked back toward the waiting line of limousines. "Ms. Harrington." She stopped. Standing outside the cemetery gates, kept back by 2 security guards, was a man in a rumpled suit. It was Caleb. He looked 10 years older than he had 2 weeks ago. His hair was messy, his eyes bloodshot. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow, starving look. "Fiona," he called out, his voice desperate against the wind. I wanted to offer my condolences, and I was hoping we could talk about the debt. Please, I've lost everything." Jessica left. The bank took the condo. Fiona looked at him. She waited for the anger to flare up. She waited for the satisfaction of revenge. But she felt nothing. He wasn't a monster anymore. He was just a small, wet man standing in the mud. She looked down at Leo, who was holding her hand. "Who is that man, Mummy?" Leo asked, squinting at Caleb. Caleb's eyes widened. He took a step forward, hope flaring in his face. Fiona looked at Caleb, then back down at her son. She smoothed Leo's hair. "That's nobody, baby," Fiona said softly. "Just someone I used to know." She turned away. Caleb shouted her name, but the sound was swallowed by the closing door of the limousine. "Where to, Ms. Harrington?" the driver asked. Fiona looked out the window as the car pulled away, leaving Caleb Hayes shrinking in the distance, a ghost of her past disappearing into the rain. "To the office," Fiona said, opening her laptop. "We have an empire to run." In the end, Caleb Hayes was right about one thing. Some people are dead weight. But he was wrong about who the weight was. He thought Fiona was the anchor holding him back, but she was the ocean he was trying to swim against. Fiona didn't destroy Caleb because she was bitter. She destroyed him because she outgrew him. She turned her pain into power, her poverty into a legacy, and her heartbreak into an empire. The greatest revenge wasn't taking his money, it was becoming the person he said she could never be, and then looking him in the eye and feeling absolutely nothing. Sometimes, the best way to win isn't to fight the past, but to build a future so big that the past doesn't fit in it anymore. What did you think of Fiona's revenge? Did Caleb deserve to lose everything? Or was leaving him in the rain enough? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal and redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.